Welcome to Your Story Doesn't End Here, the mental health podcast for military and veterans. I'm your host, Rachel, and my mission with this podcast is to be a voice for those who don't have a voice, bring awareness to mental health issues, and provide value and solutions to help make life more abundant. Hey everyone, thank you so much for coming back for another episode of Your Story Doesn't End Here. Today's guest is Sean Ambriz. He enlisted in February 2008 as a military police soldier and completed one station unit training at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. Since that time, he has served a wide variety of duty positions to include a driver, gunner, platoon medic, team leader, designated squad marksman, squad leader, MMS NCO, special reaction team NCOIC, and platoon sergeant. His duty assignment locations have been Fort Carson, Schofield Barracks, Joint Base Lewis McChord, Fort Leonard Wood. He served overseas assignments to include 2 tours in Afghanistan, and some of his more significant career achievements have been, oh my gosh, an incredible list. Inducted as number 9 into the Military Police Corps, Convent Commandant's 100, selected in 2011 as All-American Distinguished Leadership Awardee in BLC and ALC, the 4th Infantry Division NCO of the Quarter, Audie Murphy receiving the Presidential Volunteer Service Medal and earning the Purple Heart and 2 Bronze Stars with Valor, and also the author of the book Ghosts of the Valley. Sean, thank you so much for being on the show today. I know you're super humble about everything I could tell from your book, but I really appreciate you being here.
I appreciate you having me. Thank you.
Of course. So I finished reading your book, Ghosts of the Valley. What an incredible story. I am the first to admit, I usually don't watch a lot of military related movies or read a lot of books for some reason. Like they hit you in a certain way, you know? But you did such an incredible job of making me as a reader and someone who's never been in combat feel like I'm there and part of what was happening. And the things you've been through, I personally couldn't imagine. And wow, what an incredible story you have. I would love if you could just share a couple snippets and some highlights of your story with the listeners today.
Yeah, so I'm an MP, military police. That's what I joined up to be. But when the war was at its surge, when President Obama called for the surge of troops to go from Iraq to Afghanistan, everything in the Middle East and Asia, because people forget that Afghanistan's not the Middle East, it's Asia. And we had been in Afghanistan since 2001. We were in Afghanistan before we were even in Iraq. And it was at that time kind of the forgotten war. Everyone wanted to go to Iraq who, was in the military, who wanted to serve, who wanted to deploy. I definitely wanted to go to Iraq. And our orders got shifted and we were set to go to Afghanistan in like 30 to 45 days on a moment's notice. And when I got to Afghanistan, because of some previous EMT training, they had made me a medic. And that's just kind of how it was because, if you look at previous wars, like say World War II, for example, it was it was a continuous battlefield, meaning like there was a front lines and we pushed back and forth with the enemy until we took land kind of thing. But when you're working in a place like Afghanistan, it's not contiguous and it's, we're scattered throughout the country. And when you look at the terrain of Afghanistan, where I was in the Hindu Kush Mountains, everyone's very isolated, and it's not like there's not like a frontline troop that you can just push to the Taliban, and they had to scatter us and isolate us in these remote locations in the mountains. And when they did that, they separated a lot of units. So I deployed as a company, like 180 dudes, and my platoon was like 45. And when we got to where we were going, they split us down even further into squad size elements, which is, it's doable. It's a little abnormal by doctrine, but we can function that way. But when you do that, you only have one platoon medic. And when you keep the platoon medic with one group, they didn't have another for another. So that's kind of how I got thrown into that role. And I had absolutely minus EMT school, which I just did for fun. I have like zero training or aspirations to be a medic. So I kind of got thrown into that. And if anyone's watched Netflix, there's a movie on there called The Outpost. It's a war movie. Clint Eastwood's son stars in it, Orlando Bloom. And that was the unit that I was in my first deployment. And that unit, that platoon was maybe 6 miles by air from us. And they were overran by 300 to 400 Taliban fighters. It was the deadliest battle in the entire war. But, 30 days before they actually got assaulted and attacked, the Taliban kind of used us as target practice. And the book kind of follows two main battles. And one of them is in chapter 5. And essentially it was not a failed rescue mission, but it was a rescue mission in which I guess things just weren't really going our way. So the unit that was in need had multiple wounded. One of them was killed, and it essentially talks about how I didn't want to go up that hill, but I watched my leaders all volunteer to go up that hill, and it kind of gave me the courage to do so. And it kind of talks the rescue mission, how, we thought they were 200 meters up, ended up being 2,000 meters. We had no food, no water. It talks about my experience on how I kind of worked through the casualties and then became a casualty myself later on that night, trying to come down the mountain. And then that battle kind of like, to me was the I guess the format or the base of my leadership style. A lot of things that I witnessed that day were based off the leaders that I was with, because I was constantly having doubts every second and thinking that we weren't going to be able to get off, that mountain. And every time I looked over, one of my leaders were doing something, and they were trying to formulate the next set of the plan. And I used that onto my second deployment, where I was the sergeant, and I had to apply what I had learned, what I witnessed that day. And we found ourselves in a situation where 16 of us Americans were surrounded by 180 enemy fighters, and I had to be that sergeant, like I witnessed back in 2009. And it was a rough battle. It was not the deadliest, but it was the biggest battle I'd ever been in. I never thought I'd see the enemy that close. They got within 8 feet of us. I could spit on them. They were so close. So it was a pretty intense battle that came down to like pretty much sheer will on each side. And 16 of us eliminated around like 80-ish wounded and killed enemy fighters. A couple of us had some small scratches, and that was about it. So so they kind of it's pretty much straight to the point. Surrounds itself around these two battles, and then just how I came home and tried to deal with the after effects of it all. So
there's one point in the book where you talk about one of your key turning points for you as a leader, where a leader of yours took the fall for you. And from that point forward, you did everything that was asked of you. You basically became almost a different soldier because of what this leader did for you. I want you to highlight on that a little bit, because I think that it's really important for the people that are listening to hear how important the way that a leader acts impacts the people around them.
Yeah. So we were standing at some checkpoint. We were like right outside of base, and we were just monitoring vehicles that were coming through. It wasn't a crazy mission that day, and we were pretty close to the base where the cameras that pointed outside from the base could see us essentially. And I was standing there, and there was this elderly man who was running up from behind me screaming, and he was carrying this big chunk of a blanket, and it was wrapped up, and it was all bloody, and I knew what it was. And so I grabbed my aid bag and got down on a knee. This guy put this blanket in front of me and untwisted it, and it was this like 11-year-old boy-ish. He was pretty young. And he had picked up a Russian landmine, which was extremely normal over there. Afghanistan is the most heavily mined place in the entire world, just because it's been at war since forever. And the Russians laid so many mines back in the 70s when they were fighting there. And so it was normal to see. And this kid, his left hand was blown into pieces, and was missing chunks of his bone on some of his fingers, and his skin was flapped over his wrist, and was bleeding pretty good. They put some like a wasn't a real tourniquet, but like a makeshift tourniquet that the grandfather had on him, I guess. So yeah, I'm putting the tourniquet on this kid and checking his vitals, and I'm trying to fold his skin back in place, put his dressing on there. And while I'm doing all this, one of my NCOs, my sergeants, is standing above me, and his radio was going off, and the base was asking like, "Hey, what happened? Why is this kid bleeding?" Because they could see it from the cameras. And someone from the TOC, or the Tactical Operations Center, that where they're watching all this kind of unfold, they told us, "Hey, if we didn't cause that, then we can't treat it. That's just the new medical rules of engagement. They need to go seek Afghan army, Afghan police, and use the Afghan system." We were trying to, at that time in the war, like separate ourselves and let the Afghan police and army be the forefront of the vision of where they wanted to see the country. It wasn't supposed to just be us as a dictatorship. It wasn't ever supposed to be us and like, "Hey, you're going to do it the American way." It was, we were just there for support. And so they really wanted them to use the Afghan system and stop relying on us so much. But at the same time, I'm also not going to let a human being bleed out. It's just not what we do. I don't know who made that decision, who was saying what, but I made the decision because I was only a private. I was a PFC, and I made the decision that I wasn't going to take that tourniquet off, and I would just take the ash tune. And so I left it on, and I stopped a car that was going towards Asadabad, which is like the next major city, about 19 miles away, and right outside the valley. And I told him to take the kid to the hospital so he'd get treated, because I knew he'd bleed out if he tried driving that. Yeah, we got a call on the radio that we had to come back to base like immediately, and our mission got canceled. And they wanted to see whoever that was that decided to leave the tourniquet on, which was me. And no one really said anything. We just kind of accepted the fate. And when I got back to base, my platoon Sergeant Lyle was standing there, and he didn't even go on mission with us that day. He was actually in the TOC, and he watched all of it unfold and saw the decision I had made. And so he decided that he wasn't going to let me go down for that. So he saw me walking from the trucks up to the TOC, and he stopped me, and he told me to go to my room. And I said, "Sergeant Major said he wants to see me." And he said, "I told you, go to your fucking room." I said, "Roger that." And I walked away. And as I'm walking to the room, I see Sergeant Lyle standing in the position of parade rest, hands locked behind his back, and the Sergeant Major is just grilling him, yelling at him. And essentially, he was taking the fall for me. And told Sergeant Major, he told me to leave the tourniquet on, and he made it his decision. So yeah, he kind of protected my innocence, because immediately I had a bitter taste in my mouth based off that leadership that the Taliban couldn't get me, but my leadership could. And it was nice to see a leader not afraid to put their own career on the line, or their image on the line for my protection and well-being. So that was something that I've always kind of tried to teach my younger soldiers, and I tried to replicate with my guys.
Yeah, I noticed that there's kind of this theme with your leadership style throughout the book of you protecting the innocence of those underneath you. Is that still a leadership style that you follow today?
Yeah, I do. I mean, there's not deployments like there was back then. But that was one thing that going into my second deployment, I wanted to make sure that my soldiers got experience as far as serving downrange in combat, knowing what to do when things happen. But if it came to entering a doorway, popping my head up, or going up a mountain, going forward, closer towards the enemy, or whatever the case may be, in which that somebody's life had to be put, I don't want to say in danger, but at a little bit more risk, then I'd rather do it myself than my soldiers. And that's just something that my leaders did for me in my first deployment. And I wanted to make sure that was the forefront of every decision I made as a leader on that deployment.
There's another thing that you mentioned early on in the book about how there's kind of this difference between the old Army mindset and the newer Army mindset. Still being in today, do you see these major shifts? And what's kind of your opinion on the new Army of today as opposed to that old school generation?
Well, I can't speak too much on it just because I am still in, and I could get in trouble of, what I say, just because, it's not that I can't have my own opinion. It's just, I have to keep it to myself. Because, being active duty, or just, being, serving still, and we're in uniform, we lose our right of free speech. There's a reason why we lose our right of free speech. I can't say whatever I want when I want. It doesn't matter if I'm on or off, wearing the uniform or not. If I'm currently serving under contract, they take freedoms away from us on purpose so that we know what we're fighting for. And so, I mean, I can't say everything that I want to say. Do I like where the Army is going as a whole? Yeah, I'd like to think that we're learning from the past, when we're talking like leadership styles. I will say that I don't like the way, I guess, outside culture, American culture, has seized our ranks a lot. I'm trying to think how to word this without getting in trouble. I think that some people forget that what we're in business to do here. Our job is to protect the innocence of the people in the country, people with special needs, children, elderly, people who can't fight for themselves, who can't defend themselves, and people outside of this country. There's a lot of people outside of this country who want to do harm to us strictly because you're American, whether you like somebody because they're black or white or Asian or Mexican, whether you like our government, who's our president, it really doesn't matter. At the end of the day, there are a lot of people outside this country who hate your guts strictly because you're just American, plain and simple. And our job is to put our bodies in front of that and protect and kill other human beings in the protection of other American citizens. It's a very harsh job. It's a brutal job. And sometimes it's pure carnage. And I think that especially when you're not in war like we are now, where there's no longer really a conflict going on, we seem to lose sight of that. And we worry more about people's feelings, and we worry about, I'd say we worry more about maybe the political correct way for someone's pronoun, or we worry about the Army recruiting commercials that came out not too long ago that were kind of a joke. We worry about all these outside things that most people that I've served with, that like almost all of them that I know, I've rarely met some like really, really bad people serving. Most people could really give two shits about any of the other outside noise, the American culture stuff. They just want to serve, plain and simple. They really don't care what your sex is and what your race is. Like, you really don't give a shit. It's crazy the amount of different people I've seen in combat from all walks of life, all backgrounds, education, suburbs, rural. And I've just seen them do some pretty brave ass shit, like some crazy stuff that it definitely makes me proud to be an American. And when we start to shy away from what we are here to do, which is defend and kill people, then I start to have an issue with it, because we set our future generation up for failure. And when we don't train them properly, when we make them weak-minded, when we worry about everything else besides what we're here to do, then we become a detriment to ourselves at that point. And so I do worry about our future. But I will say that the transition between old guys like myself and the new generation is that we have a lot of experience. We have a lot of experience in combat, and we're able to pass that down. So hopefully they're able to listen to us and be successful in their combat.
Yeah, you even mentioned seeing like the Westboro Baptist Church protesting in a point where you could have gone anyway with that. And you even mentioned a couple of guys that did find a lot of anger towards people like that, which understandably so.
Yeah.
with what you were saying was written on their signs. But I find it very cool that you maintain this attitude of, I'm here to serve America. I'm here to protect this right to free speech. Do you think that being in combat changed your whole perspective of life compared to prior to going on to those deployments to Afghanistan?
Yeah, definitely. I think it changed my train of thought to obviously the maturity. I mean, I would be lying if I said I didn't have feelings when I saw those signs, and that I wish that I could go do what I was thinking I wanted to do. But I would be doing nothing but adding just more hate to the mix. And at the same time, coming off to that deployment of, it's just a year long of killing people and or trying to be killed. It was enough hate and death. It was enough to drown me to where I was like, okay, I don't really want anymore. I saw something very hateful in front of me, and I was like, I don't have the energy for it right now. Like, I just needed to kind of reset at that time. And I tried to also, like I said, or like you said, just remember that that's what that's what we serve for. If people have the free speech, whether I agree with it or not. As long as they're not causing any physical harm to somebody, then they could say whatever they want to say, whether I agree with it or not. It's that's the free speech. That's what makes us so great. So, because other countries, as you know, don't have that. So.
So I want to talk about the mental health aspect in your story. I know that in the beginning you talk about how suicide is just kind of, people joke about it. And I think it's a little different probably in the combat environment compared to the non-combat environment, because you literally have to have this way of coping. But I want to talk about how you, specifically the combat soldiers, cope with everything that you go through, from seeing dead bodies to physically killing people, to all that blood. Like, there's so many things. And I think you mentioned compartmentalizing a little bit, but how do you deal with everything?
Yeah, I mean, everyone kind of responds to it differently and has their own way of coping with it. I think when you're first exposed to gore, whatever that is, it's a shock, and then it happens so fast usually that it takes a couple of days sometimes for it to like really set in, or whether that's a traumatic event, whether that's seeing a dead body. You kind of just go through the flow of the emotions at that very moment in time, and then you kind of just process it later. But as far as coping with it, everyone's got their own individual thing. Some is more healthy than others. Mine was just to go to the gym or try and talk to people back home on the computer, email something, or try to get a phone call in to try to just remove my mind. And just distraction's the biggest thing. Whenever you start to think about it, you have to find your outlet on how you can distract yourself away from those thoughts. And then, yeah, I mean, it's always been a thing since the beginning of time, hundreds and years, over 200 plus years that the Army's been around. Just our dark humor, our suicide, our passive aggressive suicidal ideations, joking around about suicide, and it's part of the job. It's just how we cope with being okay with death, I guess.
So, does the Army provide any resources to you specifically when you come back from these combat deployments to help with PTSD or mental health? I know you mentioned that resources were there. You just didn't want to take advantage because it made you feel weak. But
Yeah.
were they just like thrown at you, or was it just, these are here in case?
When you're deployed, they're not really thrown at you because, like I said, every day is like, we're just so busy going on mission and stuff like that. And when you don't go on mission, maybe if like they give you a day off, you just want to lay in bed. You just want to like chill with the guys. You want to just try to get your mind off of, any traumatic event. That you don't want to spend the one day you have off downrange, like thinking about that and talking about it with somebody. So you do bury it a lot when you're deployed, but they still have the resources there. I did talk to like this Air Force counselor when I was in Afghanistan. It's all they had. But when you're not deployed, they have a plethora of different resources back here in Garrison. They have counselors that essentially are like, they can help with counseling, but they're not behavioral health. They can't issue medication or anything like that, but they're just someone to kind of like, they're certified to talk to you and stuff like that. Then you have behavioral health, which obviously can issue medication. They can help find outside resources. They have psychologists that are, licensed and certified to discuss those things. And even just small things, like the Army has like the NWR. They have things that, like paintballing on post, just something to like get away, or kayaking. Like they have things established for you and the families, so that you just kind of get out and enjoy, I guess, life or whatever. So they have a lot of things that aren't just a counselor, that can help build a soldier's morale up in many ways.
So did you take advantage of any of those resources ever, or did you just cope in your own way with PTSD? And I know you mentioned a plethora of other physical ailments, but did you get any help for the mental illness side of things?
Yeah, when I got back from to both my deployments to Fort Carson, I talked to a counselor for quite a bit. He was really, really helpful. I've switched counselors just because sometimes they come and go. Switched quite a bit, and there's been like maybe 3 of 12 that have been, very successful. Sometimes I just couldn't connect with the other ones, and I repeated the story, and I had to repeat myself, and that doctor couldn't really connect the dots. But then when I went to Hawaii, I had a really good one. She really connected the dots for me and helped kind of like rearrange the way I thought about some of the battles and some of the things and why they happened. From there, after she kind of connected those dots, I never really had to go back as much. Like I've had my moments where I might need to go back here and there, but it wasn't like I felt pretty sustained at that point, once I found the right counselor.
So do you still have those moments where you get those flashbacks that you mentioned in the book, or do you think that counseling and the help that you got helped you with controlling those things that would come up for you? For example, when you drove by a cornfield, or you mentioned at nighttime, the different things.
Yeah, cornfields I still don't mess with. Anything tall grass, I don't get freaked out. Like it's not like excessive. I just like whenever I see tall grass, I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna go this way or whatever. Like I'd rather not. But if I had to walk through a cornfield, it's not like a phobia or anything like that. I just it just ups my anxiety a little bit, because you can't see what's in there. You don't know. It's hard to respond, because whatever may be in there is able to react to contact very quick. And for people not understanding it, essentially that second battle in cornfields to get close to us, and we couldn't tell if it was the wind or if it was them pushing the cornfield or the corn stalks. And they were able to use that as concealment to get, like I said, 8 feet within us. And they got on the road with the trucks and stuff like that. We're trying to get into the vehicles. Essentially, that's what they were going to try and do. So, but as far as like daily life, I have my moments, but again, like none of it's like overly exaggerated. My anxiety just like spikes up like super crazy. Like that's the only thing I have not been able to get under control over the years is my anxiety. Any little thing, even if somebody's like, hey, I need to talk to you, I'm like, oh my God, what's it about? And I start freaking out. That's one thing I just have not been able to get my head wrapped around, is my anxiety. But as far as depression and dealing with those events, or if I start to rethink them, I could suppress it pretty well. It doesn't stick around very long.
So are you doing 20 years in the Army? Is that your plan?
Yeah, I'm not doing anything else, so might as well.
Do you have any fears surrounding getting out of the Army? Because I know you talked about that rush that you got from your deployments and the brotherhood and everything with the Army.
Yeah, well, when it comes to the rush, that adrenaline rush, I still haven't had that, since deployment. And I think that's the problem, is a lot of combat veterans go years searching for that. It's like a drug. You want more of it. As weird as it sounds, finding death and then escaping it each time is something that we all fiend for. And it's hard to replicate. You could jump out of planes and you can go on roller coasters backward. It doesn't matter. Nothing will ever top coming close to death or taking someone's life. And I don't know. As far as getting out, I'm scared shitless, because this is all I know. I joined out of high school. when I was 18 and a half, whatever it was. I mean, this is really the longest job I've ever held. And I don't really know what I want to do when I grow up. I don't, when this is all said and done, I'll retire at 39. And yeah, I don't know. Don't know what's out there in the civilian world for me.
So, what resources, if you know, do you think would be helpful for combat veterans or even active duty who come out of combat? Is there anything that you think would have been more helpful for you? And then you probably can't answer the veteran one yet because you're not there. But if there's anything that you could think of that maybe would be a great program or something that would be helpful.
I mean, as far as outside the Army, I mean, you have the VA, but there's other, nonprofit organizations out there that that do help veterans. And as far as in service, like I said, behavioral health is going to be the biggest one. I think people get so scared of going to behavioral health, or what we call the wizard, and they feel like it's going to ruin their career if they go and talk to behavioral health, because they feel like they're not mentally strong, and that's like a mark on their record. But that's just an old tale that's just not true. And so I try to get even my younger soldiers. It doesn't have to just be combat. Like, I've had soldiers that have been raped, been in major car accidents, and especially us being MPs, Hawaii, we used to find dead babies all the time. People would get murdered on base, sexual assaults and rapes, dealing with, walking into a scene where somebody has bloody panties and they just got brutally raped, and we have to deal with, and these are young 18-year-olds that are going out and doing these things but you would think that like base is like safe. Like, it could be pretty brutal. And so any one of these guys who serve and experience some form of trauma should go talk to behavioral health. I think that's the biggest resource that the Army has. I mean, obviously we have other things that online, your phone, they have militaryonesource.com that, you could talk to life counselors and stuff like that. So there's other things out there, but nothing really beats a good face-to-face counseling session with a human interaction that I think solves most problems. So.
And you gave a phenomenal list of resources in the back of your book too, something that I'm definitely going to pass forward to anyone that I think could use it. What advice would you give to a brand new soldier that is going into the MP field specifically, whether combat or not combat related? I know you were what happened with you said is not what happens with most MPs, but what's a piece of advice you'd give to a brand new MP in the Army?
Well, don't marry a stripper and get a car with a 13% interest, because it seems like every brand new soldier does those two things every time. But I would say, I do, where I work at now, I'm in charge of a basic training company. And so I'm in charge of like all the drill sergeants and stuff. And I do have the opportunity to talk to a lot of these privates that come through, and, we watch them change from civilian to soldier as they leave here to go to their first duty station. And we have a lot of talks with trying to set them up on the right path and what they should be doing when they get to their first unit. I mean, in the Army's simple as far as collecting a paycheck. You show up in the right time, right uniform, and you do the right thing that you're told to do. It's a pretty simple job. It's a food chain, and there's always somebody above you, and they're going to tell you to do something, and you just do it. As far as having a successful career, it's going to be doing the extra. It's going to, the Army nowadays leans heavily on intelligence. If you look at the guys on like World War II and stuff like that, like, no knock on them. It's just that, there was a draft. They had a vast amount of the men go and fight back then. And it was just, like I said, push that forward line and just kill and defend and try to eliminate as many Nazis as you could to end the war, plain and simple. But nowadays, with technology becoming a thing, down to like how, our vehicles function, how we pull information and intelligence, how those things shift to the battlefield, they just require soldiers to be so intelligent nowadays, and not just understand how does this weapon work? Can you disassemble the weapon? It's more to it than just that. Getting people, and that's one thing with leadership, getting people to do what you want them to do without forcing them and begging them it's a science and art all in itself. And we try to tell these young soldiers that they need to understand their job. So if you're usually, when you go to your first duty station, you start out as a gunner, lowest of the low, and you work your way to a driver, and then a team leader, and then maybe a squad leader, and you work your way up the ranks. And I try to tell them to master everything they can at their level. Like, don't worry about what A, B, and C, don't worry about what these guys are doing. Watch just your sector of fire. Don't be looking somewhere else. You stay in your lane, you focus on your lane. If you're the driver of the truck, be the best driver there is in the platoon. Know how many lube points are on the truck. Know the deficiencies with your truck. Where are the parts at? Are they on order? Do you need to get them on order? Know the PSI that goes in the tire. Just everything that is about your job. Know it, master it, and you move on to the next one. And I try to tell them, don't try to go out and be like the best super soldier in the world. Like, it takes time to try to master this job, and you think you know it, then you learn something else. Like, you need to go out and just lay a brick as perfectly as a brick can be laid. That's it. And you do that enough, and you'll have a wall. Don't try and go out and build the best wall in the world. Just lay one brick at a time, and everything else will fall into place. And study as much as you can. I mean, the Army has regulations, technical manuals, DA pamphlets. Just get smart. And that's the best thing you could do, is be a smart leader. And, that helps to defend yourself when people want to try and get one up on you. So when you're intelligent.
What do you think are some of the key components to being an effective leader in the military today?
Caring about people. That's it. If you care about people, you take care of your soldiers will take care of you. There's really not much to it. These have all these leadership classes and courses, and they're great, but it's pretty simple. If you just take care of your soldiers, you understand them, you know everything about them, their parents' names, their kids, where they're from, what makes them tick. If you learn all these things, then you can get them to do what you need them to do. They'll want to work for you, and in turn, the organization will be successful.
I couldn't agree more. Sean, thank you so much for being on the show. Your book, Ghosts of the Valley, phenomenal book. Everyone needs to go check it out. Where can people find you so they can check out your book and support you?
Facebook, Sean Tobias Ambriz, the website, SeanTobiasAmbriz.com. Instagram is chief_pinkmist. And then the book is on Amazon, Nook, Kindle, and Audible.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. I appreciate you, and you are amazing.
I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for taking the time to listen in today. Each week, I'll be bringing you value in the mental health space and its direct impact on service members and veterans. If you feel you personally got value today from this episode, it would mean the world to me if you would leave a 5-star rating and review and share this to your audience. Until next time, remember, your story matters, your mental health matters, and your story doesn't end here.